The Summer I Said Yes Part 2. Chapter 7 The Sparkling Kiss. Later that night, Villa Bianchi, moonlit courtyard. The courtyard smelled like jasmine and old stone. It was quiet now. The dinner party had drifted into scattered conversations and lazy digestives. Laughter echoed distantly from the terrace. Candles burned lower. Glasses clinked softly. Somewhere, in another part of the villa, someone was playing piano, slow and a little off-key, like they didn't care who heard. Ivy stood near the fountain in the courtyard, holding a delicate glass of limoncello she hadn't touched. The stone around her was still warm from the day's sun, but the air was cooler now, wrapped in the soft breeze that always seemed to come with the Amalfi Coast after dark. She exhaled, slow and unsteady. She'd survived. The dinner. The family. The questions. The performances. But the tightness in her chest hadn't let go. Behind her, a door creaked open. She didn't need to turn to know it was him. Matteo. He moved like he always did, silent, certain, measured. No wasted steps. Even his footsteps across the courtyard gravel were barely audible. Ivy glanced back and caught the brief glint of his cufflink in the moonlight. "You disappeared," he said, stopping beside her. "Needed a second to debrief with my nervous system," she replied, sipping the edge of her drink. "It's still screaming in 3 languages. You did well. That's what you say when you're trying to comfort a child after a piano recital." He didn't laugh. Just tilted his head and looked at her, really looked. The kind of look that stripped the space between them down to its bones. Ivy's mouth went dry. "They like you," he said. "You won them over. I think Nonna wants me to teach a class on eye contact." Chiara's unconvinced. "Chiara would be unconvinced if I came with a resume and a certificate of authenticity." He smiled at that, a quiet, reluctant smile, like he hadn't meant to let it happen. But then, from the terrace, a voice called out in accented English. "Kiss her, Matteo. Show us it's real." Ivy froze. She turned, slowly. Several of the cousins were gathered along the terrace railing, wine glasses in hand, eyes shining with the kind of tipsy delight that turns into trouble. Someone else whistled. Someone else clapped. One of the aunts made a grand, swooning gesture. Ivy looked up at them, then at Matteo, then back at them. "No pressure," she whispered out the side of her mouth. He didn't move. His expression unreadable. Not stiff, not warm. Neutral. Then he took a single step closer. "Let's give them what they want," he murmured. She nodded once. But her heart was already hammering in her chest. Too fast. Too loud. She could hear it in her ears. Matteo reached for her hand, just like he had earlier, but this time, he didn't let it drop. His other hand came to her waist, just gently, like she was something fragile he'd promised not to break. Ivy's breath hitched. The courtyard around them seemed to go still. And then, he kissed her. Soft. Deliberate. His lips met hers like it had been planned, like it had been choreographed down to the second. She kept her eyes closed. Tried to think about angles and appearances and how long a fake kiss should last. But then his hand moved, just slightly, a shift against her waist. His thumb brushed the fabric of her dress. And it lingered. The kiss lingered. Not awkward. Not stiff. Not performative. Just, real enough to confuse her. Just warm enough to short-circuit logic. Her hand tightened in his. She didn't know how long it lasted. 5 seconds. 10. A whole century, disguised as a kiss. And then, he pulled away. Slowly. She opened her eyes. His were already on her. The cousins on the terrace whooped and cheered, but it sounded far away now, like it was happening in another room, through thick glass. Ivy's heart was in her throat. She wanted to say something, to make a joke, to shrug, to shake it off. But Matteo beat her to it. Convincing enough, he said casually, releasing her hand. He adjusted his cufflink, unnecessary, controlled, back in command, and turned toward the villa. That was it. Ivy stood frozen, the taste of his kiss still blooming on her lips, the pressure of his hand still imprinted on her waist like a mark. She watched his back as he walked away, steady, calm, untouchable. And for the first time since she'd arrived, Ivy wasn't sure who was faking what anymore. Chapter 8 Villa Intrigues. Next morning, Villa Bianchi, breakfast garden. The sun was already warm when Ivy stepped out into the garden. A long, linen-covered table stretched beneath a canopy of lemon trees, dappled in early light. Bees hummed lazily around the flowers. Porcelain cups clinked gently against saucers. It was all too perfect, like a commercial for a perfume named Inheritance. Ivy approached slowly, feeling like she'd stumbled into someone else's dream. Again. The family was already mid-breakfast: Matteo, Nonna Bianca, a few cousins, and her. Chiara. She looked like she'd just stepped off the cover of a Milan fashion editorial, crisp white shirt dress, oversized sunglasses perched on her head, no makeup, but somehow flawless, and gold jewelry that looked antique and intentional. Chiara was not the kind of woman who asked questions directly. She made you feel them instead. Matteo rose as Ivy approached. He pulled out her chair without a word, then sat back down. His posture was relaxed, but she felt the tension in his fingertips when they brushed hers. Just briefly. Like a signal. Like a warning. Chiara glanced up from her espresso. "Good morning," she said. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "You must have slept well. You look rested." Ivy smiled politely. "I did, thank you. The room is beautiful. And very quiet." Chiara murmured, stirring her espresso. "That's the one overlooking the lemon orchard, yes?" "I think so." Funny. That room was always Matteo's ex-fiancée's favorite. The table quieted just half a second too long. Matteo, without looking up from his cappuccino, said, "She's not exactly famous for her taste, is she?" That earned a soft chuckle from one of the uncles. Chiara just arched an eyebrow, like she wasn't finished. "I suppose I'm just a little surprised," she said, voice light, slicing into a piece of melon with surgical precision. "That you've never mentioned Ivy before." "Not once. And now suddenly, fiancé." The word dripped like syrup. Ivy kept her tone even. "It all happened pretty quickly." Chiara said, nodding like she was trying to be generous. "Love at lightning speed. How romantic." Ivy felt her stomach twist slightly. Not from the food, from the subtle way Chiara's words curled at the edges. Like they were dipped in gold, but still sharp. "She told me the story last night," Nonna Bianca said, breaking in. "In the courtyard. After the kiss." She smiled fondly. "It was charming. And honest. Ivy's quite the storyteller." Chiara gave her a gracious nod. "Of course, Nonna. I'm sure she's very convincing." Matteo set his cup down, finally looking up. His expression was unreadable. She is. That's why I fell for her. The words were simple. Too simple. And for a split second, Ivy hated how much she wanted to believe them. Chiara leaned in, just slightly, addressing no one in particular. I don't know. Something doesn't add up. It was quiet. And then, she said it. Lightly. Casually. But clearly. I've seen Matteo date. He's never liked assistants. He barely talks to them. Now he's marrying one. She turned to an uncle seated 2 spots down. Doesn't that seem strange to you, Aldo? Uncle Aldo, mid-bite of croissant, looked like he wanted no part in it. He made a vague, non-committal noise and focused on his marmalade. Ivy isn't like the others, Matteo said. It was the first time he'd sounded defensive. Chiara raised an eyebrow. Clearly. Then she smiled. One of those sugar-sweet, knife-sharp smiles that meant, I'm watching you. Ivy pretended to butter her toast. Her hands were steady, but barely. The atmosphere had shifted, subtly, but undeniably. She didn't dare look at Matteo. Not here. Not with everyone watching. Not when she could feel Chiara's gaze still trailing her, like a velvet rope pulling tighter. The rest of breakfast passed in small talk, garden plans, wedding menus, the weather. Ivy nodded and smiled and played her part like a woman in a well-directed scene. But the whole time, her mind was racing. Chiara wasn't convinced. She had noticed the gaps. The tension. The 2 perfect answers. And she wasn't going to let it go. Chapter 9 Poolside Whispers. Later that afternoon, the lower pool at Villa Bianchi. There were 2 pools at Villa Bianchi. Naturally. The upper one, closer to the main house, was pristine and picture-perfect, framed by tall cypress trees, flanked by white umbrellas, and positioned like a statement piece just off the east wing. That was the one the family used, where aperitivos were served in tall glasses and everyone wore wide-brimmed hats. The lower pool, though. Ivy had stumbled upon it by accident, wandering aimlessly in search of solitude and a break from relentless perfection. It sat on a sunken terrace behind a row of old lemon trees, surrounded by aged stone and overgrown ivy, the plant, not the person, with faded tiles and a tiny, uneven fountain that trickled water like it was half asleep. It was quieter here. Shady. Forgotten. She liked it instantly. She stretched out on one of the lounges, still in her cover-up, toes brushing the edge of the pool. Her oversized sunglasses shielded her from the sun, and, more importantly, from the world. Her phone buzzed once beside her. A text from Muriel. Dinner tonight is on the west veranda. Smart casual. You'll have time for hair. Ivy ignored it. For the first time since she'd stepped off the plane, she wasn't performing. She wasn't being Matteo's fiancée. She was just Ivy. Slightly sunburned, slightly overwhelmed, and deeply suspicious that she was in way over her head. A breeze rustled the lemon trees. Somewhere, a bee hummed past. The smell of salt and rosemary clung to the air. And then, voices. 2 of the villa staff had entered from the side path, not seeing her tucked under the umbrella. They carried fresh towels, water bottles, a tray of chilled fruit. They were speaking Italian. Fast, familiar, relaxed. Ivy couldn't understand most of it, just enough to catch the rhythm. And then she heard it. One word. Fiancé. The tone shifted immediately. The younger one, tall with a tight bun and white sneakers, said something quick and hushed. The older one, more cautious, gave a soft click of the tongue. Then came the name. Elena. Ivy's heart paused. She didn't move. She barely breathed. The older one lowered her voice, but Ivy still caught enough of it, tone, inflection, a few words that needed no translation. Matteo, troppo silenzioso, dopo che sparita. Matteo, too quiet, after she disappeared. The other gasped. Dispersa. Just like that. A pause. Then more words, careful now. Non si parla. Tutti lo sanno, ma nessuno dice nulla. No one speaks of it. Everyone knows, but no one says anything. Ivy felt something cold press against her skin, and realized her glass of water had tilted in her lap. She quickly straightened it, still pretending to nap, though now her pulse was drumming in her ears. The women were quiet again. The tray of fruit was set down. Towels folded. Then, footsteps, quick, polite, and they were gone. Ivy sat up slowly, sunglasses still on, staring out at the blue-green water like it might explain something. Elena. That was the name Chiara had dropped like a scented dagger. Matteo's real ex-fiancée. The one who vanished. She felt a prickling along the back of her neck. Disappeared. No one disappeared from a family like this. Not without someone knowing. Not without talk. And yet, no one had mentioned her directly. Not Nonna. Not Matteo. Not even Muriel in one of her terrifyingly detailed emails. Until now, Elena had been a footnote. A ghost. A fashionable ex. But hearing it this way, whispered in the shade, behind lemon trees and linen towels, changed everything. Ivy suddenly felt very, very awake. Was she filling a role? Or replacing a shadow? And why hadn't Matteo warned her? Chapter 10. A yacht called Desire. Early evening, Porto di Amalfi Marina Coppola. The first thing Ivy saw was the yacht. Correction, the first thing Ivy saw was the fleet of yachts, their glossy hulls lined up in smug, opulent rows, like a billionaire's showroom. But Matteo's was the one in the center, long, sleek, white as polished bone, with chrome railings and dark-tinted windows that curved like a designer's pen sketch brought to life. It didn't float so much as pose. And Ivy, in 5-inch heels and a silk gown that moved like smoke, suddenly felt like the least expensive thing on the dock. The car rolled to a stop. Deep breath. Muriel had texted her. You're the star tonight. Star. Right. Stars didn't sweat under their hairline and wonder if they'd trip walking up a gangway. But Ivy stepped out of the car anyway, her gown cascading down like a waterfall of red silk. The dress was strapless, bold, almost scandalous, but sculpted and structured and ridiculously expensive. Muriel had insisted on red, classic, Italian, unforgettable. And Ivy, who'd argued for something black and safe, had lost. Now, she was glad she had. Because when she stepped onto the dock, everything changed. Heads turned. Not subtly. From the moment she appeared, people glanced, paused, stared, a few not even trying to pretend otherwise. The soft breeze off the sea tugged her hair gently around her shoulders. The sky was turning peach-colored, and the water shimmered like liquid opal. And Matteo. Matteo was already on the deck, speaking to a pair of older men in tailored white linen. He turned just as she boarded. His eyes lifted. His conversation stopped mid-sentence. For a fraction of a second, he simply looked. And Ivy felt it, the shift in him. Not performative. Not staged. Something real, or close enough to hurt. He came down the steps toward her. "You wear red," he said, quiet and amused. "Now I'm worried about the other men on board." "You should be," she replied. She smiled. She didn't mean to. He offered his arm. She took it. Together, they climbed the polished wood stairs to the upper deck, where white draped tables glittered with glassware and fresh flowers, and jazz drifted from unseen speakers like it had always belonged to the sea. The family was gathered, laughing, sipping wine, some already dancing under strings of golden lights strung across the deck. Waitstaff floated with trays of aperitifs, prosecco, spritzes, something fizzy and pink with blood orange slices. Ivy accepted a drink and took a slow, grounding sip. Matteo hadn't left her side. "Don't leave me tonight," she said under her breath. "I won't," he replied. And he meant it. But Chiara was already watching. She approached later, right after the second toast, when Ivy was mid-conversation with one of the uncles about a hotel in Lake Como. Chiara emerged from the shadows like a fashion-forward shark, draped in black silk with gold cuffs, her expression unreadable. "May I steal our bride-to-be for a moment?" she asked, smiling. The kind of smile reserved for diplomats and snakes. Matteo hesitated. But Ivy, trying to be polite, nodded. "Of course." Chiara led her to the side of the deck, near the railing where the sea shimmered in full view, boats bobbing in the distance like distant jewels. "You look stunning," Chiara said lightly, sipping something clear over ice. "Truly." "The dress. The hair. Very accurate." Ivy kept her voice even. "Thank you." Chiara tilted her head. "Do you enjoy boats, Ivy?" "I've only been seasick twice so far, so I'm counting this as a win." "Ah." A small pause. "And yet you're marrying into a family that sails more often than they drive. Funny how life works." Another sip. "Then, tell me again where you two met." "Matteo said in the office, but you didn't say which one. Was it the Chicago property? Or Dubai?" Ivy blinked. That hadn't been covered. "New York," she said carefully. "Headquarters." "Oh, that's right. I always forget how often Matteo's actually in the building. He seems so remote from it all, doesn't he?" Ivy smiled tightly. "I guess he makes exceptions." Chiara leaned a little closer, voice lowering. "Just between us, when was the engagement exactly?" "He told Nonna it was April, but I heard it happened in May." "So sudden, wasn't it? After all this time?" Ivy froze, just for a breath. A beat too long. Chiara saw it. She didn't press. She simply smiled again and took another sip. Then she leaned slightly forward, not threatening, not overt, just a whisper closer, a shade darker. "Be careful," she said softly. "This family has history. And memory. The things we forget tend to echo louder than we expect." Ivy stared at her. Chiara straightened, smoothed the front of her gown, and said, cheerfully now, almost flippant, "You really do wear red well, though. Nonna used to say only women with something to prove should wear it." Then she turned and disappeared into the crowd. Ivy stood at the railing, frozen in place. Her glass was still cold in her hand. From behind her, she felt Matteo approaching again, silent, steady. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. She kept her eyes on the water and whispered, "Who was she, Matteo?" He didn't answer. Chapter 11 The letter in the drawer. Late night Matteo's private study, Villa Bianchi. It had started as a search for a charger. Ivy's phone was dead, she hadn't noticed until after dinner, and now it blinked uselessly in her hand while she wandered the hallways of the West Wing. Matteo had gone to speak with a family friend who'd dropped in unannounced, and the villa staff had mostly vanished into the quiet of the evening. She could have waited. Should have. But the door to Matteo's study was already open. Just slightly. And Ivy, barefoot now in the silk robe Maril had laid out on her bed, a soft, dove-grey wrap that made her feel like she should be sipping tea from a bone china cup while reading poetry, leaned her head inside. The lights were off. Only the hallway sconces behind her sent a faint glow across the floorboards. "Matteo," she whispered. No answer. The room smelled faintly of leather and vetiver. Expensive things. Personal things. There were tall shelves lined with books in multiple languages, framed photos, and old hotel blueprints framed like art. One wall held nothing but glass cabinets displaying vintage keys from every property the Bianchi family had ever opened. It was a beautiful room. Private. Not designed for guests. But still, her phone was dead. And she was tired. And this was, technically, her fiancé's study. So she stepped in. Her eyes adjusted slowly as she moved toward the desk, heavy, walnut, likely antique, and knelt to check the outlet underneath. No charger. She straightened up, brushing her hair behind her ears, and reached for the top drawer to see if one might be tucked away inside. It slid open with a soft, well-oiled sigh. Inside, pens, a few paper clips, a leather notebook. And a letter. Folded, hand-addressed, no envelope. Yellowed slightly at the edges. Ivy almost closed the drawer, almost, but something about the way her name wasn't on it made her pause. The paper was old-school heavy. The handwriting elegant, slanted, distinctly feminine. It said one word on the outside, in delicate black ink. Matteo. She knew it was wrong to touch it. But she touched it anyway. She slid it gently from the drawer and unfolded it, hands careful, like it might disintegrate under her fingers. The scent of it was faint but there, perfume, faded with time, something floral and expensive and French. She didn't mean to read it. But she read it anyway. Matteo. I shouldn't be writing this. You told me not to. You said if I left, that was it, no letters, no calls. But I didn't know I would miss you like this. I didn't know what silence would feel like. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I did love you. And I knew I was going to ruin you if I stayed. Your world was too polished. Too perfect. I was starting to break it. I saw it in your face. I'm sorry. For not staying. For not explaining. For letting your family hate me. They should. Maybe you should too. But part of me hopes you kept this. Just so you'd know. It wasn't a goodbye to you. It was a goodbye to the version of me I couldn't survive being anymore. Love. Elena. Ivy stared at the letter. Her mouth had gone dry. The script blurred for a second, not because she didn't understand it, but because the meaning was too clear. This wasn't a breakup letter. This was an ending wrapped in guilt and something messier than love. It wasn't angry. It wasn't cruel. It was unfinished. And suddenly, all the little things, the way Matteo avoided the word before, the way Chiara looked at her like she was a knockoff, the way the staff lowered their voices when Elena's name came up, they made sense. There was a history here. A woman who left. But not completely. Ivy carefully refolded the letter. She held it for a long moment. Then, silently, slowly, she returned it to the drawer exactly where she found it, aligning the edges like it had never been touched. She stepped back from the desk and left the room without turning on the light. She walked barefoot through the silent hallways, heart loud in her chest. When she reached her own room, she shut the door and leaned against it, pressing her hands flat to the wood. Her pulse wouldn't slow. She wasn't just pretending anymore. She was stepping into someone else's space, someone Matteo had never quite let go of. And suddenly, the lie felt heavier. Chapter 12 Seeds of Doubt. The next morning, Ivy's balcony, Villa Bianchi. The birds didn't care that she didn't sleep. They chirped like it was their job, obnoxiously cheerful in the lemon trees just beyond the stone balcony. The sky was pastel blue, the light soft, the sea below impossibly calm. Everything looked like a painting. Ivy sat on the cushioned lounge chair, still wrapped in the robe she hadn't bothered to change out of, her hair pulled into a loose braid that had mostly fallen apart overnight. A porcelain espresso cup sat untouched on the small side table, the foam gone flat. A half-eaten croissant flaked onto a linen napkin. The letter wouldn't leave her head. It wasn't a goodbye to you. It was a goodbye to the version of me I couldn't survive being anymore. What kind of version was she being? The imposter. The replacement. The warm, soft-spoken American stand-in for the woman who'd left but apparently never really let go. She had thought it was all under control. The rules were simple: show up, play the part, don't get attached. But Matteo was the problem. He was changing. Or maybe, she was just starting to see past his carefully polished surface. Last night, after the yacht, after the letter, he'd knocked gently on her door. Not to flirt. Not to make small talk. Just to ask if she'd made it home safely. That was all. And the way he'd said it, soft, like he'd meant it, had made her chest ache. She had closed the door with shaking hands. Because kindness was more dangerous than charm. Charm could be deflected. Laughed off. Managed. But kindness. That was sharp in a different way. It opened little cracks in you. Made you start to wonder if maybe this thing you were pretending could somehow become real. That was the lie now. Not the fake engagement. The possibility of something real underneath it. She didn't want to want it. But she did. And that terrified her. A soft knock startled her out of the spiral. She turned, blinking as Matteo stepped out onto the balcony, already dressed for the day in another one of his unfairly well-fitted linen shirts, sleeves rolled casually to his elbows, the top button undone just enough to look unintentionally perfect. He held a small paper bag in one hand. "I brought the lemon pastries," he said. "The ones from the village bakery. You bribing me with carbs? They're flaky. Irresistible." He set the bag on the table and sat down across from her, not pressing. Just there. Ivy stared at him for a long beat. "Why me?" she asked quietly. Matteo blinked. "What do you mean? Out of all the people you could have asked. All the women you've dated. All the ones who already know how to navigate this life. Why ask me to pretend to be your fiancé?" He was quiet for a moment. Not thrown, just thoughtful. Then, calmly, because you were the only one I trusted to tell the truth while lying. Ivy blinked. He continued. You're honest, Ivy. Even when it's uncomfortable. Even when it makes things messy. I knew you wouldn't lose yourself in this. I thought you'd keep me grounded. But you never said anything about her, Ivy whispered. Matteo stiffened. He didn't ask who. He didn't need to. Elena, she said. She's still in this house. Not literally. But everywhere. His eyes dropped to the table. His fingers tapped once, then stilled. I didn't hide her from you, he said slowly. But I didn't bring her up because I didn't want her to define this. This fake engagement. This connection, he said. That word. Connection. Too intimate. Too honest. Ivy swallowed hard. You loved her, she said. Yes. Do you still? He didn't answer. And somehow, that was worse. He stood a moment later, smoothing his shirt, the muscles in his jaw tight. There's something I need to take care of in town, he said, voice more formal now. I'll be back before dinner. And just like that, he turned and left, the breeze catching the hem of his shirt as he walked back inside. Ivy sat still. The birds were singing again. The espresso had gone cold. And inside her chest, something even colder was blooming. A single, sharp question. Was she just the shadow of someone else's story? That's the end of this part, but trust me, the next one is even more thrilling. We drop fresh episodes every day, so don't miss out. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned, you won't want to miss what's coming next.
Thanks for listening to Billionaire Romance Stories, where love meets luxury in the most unexpected places. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. We love hearing your favorite twists and favorite theories. And don't forget to ring that bell, because in this world of yachts, secrets, and luxurious romance, the next story is always one click away.